It was a relationship born on the battlefield.
They had served together in Iraq. He was a handsome guy, and ladies liked the way he looked in a uniform.
She saw herself being an officer. She saw herself married. She saw herself one day with kids.
But those dreams are shattered when a string of mysterious disappearances rocks their tight-knit Southern community.
I've been calling you for several days, and you ain't return my phone call.
You need to call somebody and let somebody know something, baby. Anybody heard from you?
You got two young women going missing between a week of one another.
This was a successful individual, young, her whole future in front of her.
She received her master's August the 12th, and, you know, it just didn't make sense. 4 days later, you gone.
But as this investigation picks up steam, a deadly discovery will bring everyone's worst fear to fruition.
Oh my God, this is a young girl.
This is a case that you don't normally see people that do this, unless you're Jeffrey Dahmer or somebody that has a very twisted personality.
I hope it's not that girl. Oh, Jesus. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. He was a demon walking the earth.
Thursday, August 23rd, 2012. It's an early summer morning in a peaceful neighborhood just north of Columbia, South Carolina. But on this day, there's a buzz of excitement in the air.
It was the first day of school, so you had buses back on the road, you had kids walking to school, you had parents walking their kids to school, taking their kids to school.
At a home on the north side of town, a young mother named Kristen Brown is preparing to do just that.
Come on, get buckled up. Mommy's gonna be so late for work.
Okay, Mom.
Did you get your lunch?
Here's this woman, typical morning, getting ready to take her kid to school. While departing, she looks in the neighbor's yard, and what do you see?
Hold on.
There was a body in the front yard.
She was face down in the front yard.
Moments later, Kristen's frantic 911 call reaches area dispatchers.
I just found a dead female, black young female, right next door to my house.
You just found what, ma'am?
A dead, black young female in my neighbor's front yard.
She was in shock, and for a good reason.
It's crazy. Nice neighborhood. It's the first day of school. You know, excited about the school year, excited about doing new things, and someone leaves a body in the front yard of a home. It's crazy.
Even worse, Kristen fears she might recognize the victim.
Jesus Christ, I hope it's not this little girl. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus.
5 days earlier, a 15-year-old girl named Gabby Swainson had disappeared just a few miles from this location. Her disappearance was all over the news, and police issued a massive manhunt. Kristen had every reason to believe that it was her.
We've got help on the way, ma'am, okay? Just try to stay calm and help be there soon.
Jesus Christ.
But as authorities race to the scene, they know Gabby isn't the only young woman to have gone missing in Columbia during the past 24 hours.
The other young woman's name was Almanita Smith. She was a beautiful 26-year-old woman who was a staff sergeant in the U.S. Army and a master's student. Her family had reported her missing 24 hours earlier.
But just who was this person lying lifeless in the yard? And how had she gotten there? The answer will tear a hole in a family's heart and bring investigators face to face with a monster.
In 21 years of law enforcement, that was absolutely the worst thing that I'd ever heard.
Born in Tuskegee, Alabama in 1986, it was clear there was always something special about Almanita Smith.
She was very outgoing, very bright, compassionate, very smart, had quick wit, and was pretty much a born leader.
Anything she put her mind to and her heart to it, she did it. She was just that go-getter.
In fact, by the time Almanita hit high school, this doe-eyed beauty displayed a drive and maturity well beyond her years.
She was your typical teenager, but when it was time for her to take on life seriously, she took it on seriously, and she had goals. She had things that she wanted to do.
She was just stellar in school.
I mean, that was just her thing. That was real big to her. She was on the basketball team. She was on the track team. She was a wavette or a dance squad for the band. She played tennis.
She actually won homecoming queen. She was turning into this gorgeous little 5'3" woman.
And Almanita believed it was her destiny to serve in the United States military. After high school, she enlisted in the Army.
She saw herself being an officer. She saw herself married. She saw herself one day with kids. But more than anything, she saw herself making sure her mom and her dad were taken care of.
True to form, in just a few short years, Almanita rose to the rank of staff sergeant while earning a college degree and serving 2 dangerous tours of duty in Iraq.
She was very driven, very motivated. It's like, what's the point of doing it if you can't be the best at doing it?
After Almanita returned from Iraq, she settled in Columbia, South Carolina for grad school. She joined the Army Reserves, earned an MBA, and began working on another master's in education.
She's a homeowner. By the age of 24, with 2 degrees, MBAs, that's very impressive for someone her age.
She wanted to retire out of the Army. She went to school for business. Once she finished with her military career, she wanted to open up her own little club/restaurant. She just wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Although Almanita dated and had boyfriends over the years, she mostly concentrated on her career and education.
She dated, but that was secondary. She spent most of her time working on herself.
But in the spring of 2012, the blossoming beauty ran into a ghost from her past. 27-year-old California native Marcus Bailey.
Almanita Smith?
Marcus, hey.
Hey, how you doing?
I've been good. How are you?
She had met him during a tour in Iraq.
Here's this guy, Marcus Bailey, another veteran. Handsome, the guy looks great in his uniform, but moreover, he could relate to her. They had something in common, and that was serving in the U.S. Army.
He told Almanita that he was still in the Army and that he was a drill sergeant stationed nearby at Fort Jackson.
So, any plans?
Well, I always had dreams of being a club DJ.
When she met him, you know, he was doing well. He was nice. He's in the military as well. Very sweet, very focused, just a nice guy.
Over the next few months, Almanita and Marcus did their best to stay in touch.
When they would go to parties, they would see each other and would talk, casual conversation. But she told me that they wanted to be in a relationship.
I think there was just a period where she met him and kind of moved fast.
Almanita has this nice home, 4 bedrooms. She's 24 years old. She's got everybody but somebody to share this with. He needed a place to stay. She was lonely. They were dating. It only made sense in her mind that, hey, why don't you come live with me?
While it seemed like Almanita's life was a fantasy come true, the summer of 2012 brought with it an even more tangible accomplishment. On August 12th, she earned her master's degree in education from Columbia College.
She had just graduated with her master's degree, and the following week, she was supposed to go through an officer program.
It seemed like life was coming up roses for Almanita. That's why what happened next was so impossible to believe.
Her daddy and her mama was calling. The school had been calling, and that is when they realized something was wrong.
In the summer of 2012, Army reservist Almanita Smith was on the fast track to success in Columbia, South Carolina.
She had just graduated with her master's degree, and she was a top performer. She had the backing of her chain of command. They wanted to see her do great. They knew that she can do great. They just wanted to see exactly what the future held for her.
She was so driven. There are a lot of 25-year-olds that ain't doing nothing And there are a lot of 40-year-olds that haven't completed or even remotely did half of what she had accomplished.
A string of accomplishments that Almanita happily shared with her love interest, Marcus Bailey.
She had reconnected with Marcus in the spring of 2012. They started dating, and he eventually moved into Almanita's home.
Everything was going great for her.
But that good life was about to take an unexpected and mysterious turn. It begins the morning of Wednesday, August 22nd. Almanita is scheduled to be in a class for officer candidate school, but she never arrives.
Whatever she set forth, all her goals, she wanted to accomplish them. So if there was someplace she had to be on time, she was gonna be there on time. Her classmates in the program was calling her, trying to find out where she was. It was unheard of.
Hey, Almanita, you weren't in class today, so I was seeing what was going on. Give me a call back.
That was completely unlike her. She was not gonna not go to school. She was a stickler for her responsibilities and what she needed to do. She would have not gone to school unless something had happened.
Almanita's classmates aren't the only ones concerned about her whereabouts.
Her dad had been calling her, and her dad couldn't get her. The school had been calling for Nita. They couldn't get her.
It was extremely out of character for her not to be in contact with her parents. Like, I know she talked to her daddy every night, like every day.
By that afternoon, there was still no sign of Almanita. It's then that her father, Harold Davis, makes a decision.
I called Nita's mom, and I called Richland County Sheriff Department. Ma'am, my name is Harold Davis. I'm calling from Tuskegee, Alabama. I have a daughter. My name is Almanita Smith. I haven't talked to her since Friday, and we normally talk every day or every other day. And I want to know if I can get someone to go by our home and check and see what's going on.
Okay, Mr. Davis, we're going to send an officer out there to see if they can try to make contact with her.
They sent a deputy out, goes to the house, knocks on the door. Marcus answers the door.
Hi, I'm Officer O'Donnell. We're here to do a welfare check at this address.
For who?
For an Almanita Smith. You mind if we come on in?
Of course.
Are you aware where she is?
Well, she was here early today, but she went shopping. I wasn't aware that she was missing.
He was at the home by himself. He said that Almanita had left that day, earlier that day at about 11 o'clock, and had gone shopping. He said that she received a phone call from someone. He didn't know who. He said she went into a dark-colored Toyota and left. He didn't see the driver didn't come in. The driver just beeped the horn from outside and drove off.
Marcus says, well, she's still not back. Matter of fact, and putting it on the speaker, he tries to give her a call, doesn't answer the phone. Then he even sends a text message, but yet no response.
Do you mind if we look around?
Yeah, of course.
She did a cursory search of the residence. At that point, didn't appear to be anything out of the ordinary.
While Marcus is talking to them, he remains calm, talks to them in a normal tone, and officers being trained to spot signs of domestic violence or struggle. When they looked at Marcus, there were no signs, there were no cuts, there were no bruises, no scratches. So things appeared to be as normal.
Well, thanks. If you hear from Almanita, do you mind having her call her father? He's pretty concerned about her.
Yeah, of course.
But just what had happened to Almanita? As the hours tick by that evening, no one seems to have an answer.
I called a couple of her friends, and they hadn't seen her.
At this point, nobody knows who this potential guy in this dark car is. Family doesn't know, Marcus doesn't know. We're just following a story down a rabbit hole.
She would have not gone away with someone without someone knowing. I mean, she would have called.
But for officers at the Richland County Sheriff's Department, there's further cause for concern. Almanita isn't the only young African-American woman to have gone missing in Columbia this week.
At this same time, there was a missing teenager that had been missing in the neighborhood.
5 days earlier, a young girl named Gabby Swainson had disappeared. She was all over the news. This was a reoccurring story. Nobody knew where she was.
She had been missing for a while. We had believed that she had been kidnapped by someone that's close to the home.
They had organized searches, manhunts. You know, people were out trying to figure out where was this young girl.
Is it possible these two disturbing disappearances are connected? At this point, no one knows for certain.
Almanita's friends and family were deeply concerned. What are the odds of two young African-American women going missing in the same area in the same week?
But in less than 24 hours, a sickening discovery will close a chapter on one of these two missing person cases and open the door to a baffling murder investigation.
It was a shocker to me. I got a phone call from my sister, and it was awful.
That was the worst day of my life.
In less than a week, two young African-American women have gone missing in Columbia, South Carolina. The first person was a 15-year-old cheerleader named Gabby Swainson. Then, just 5 days after her disappearance, 26-year-old Almanita Smith, a beloved Army veteran, vanished as well.
Richland County is kind of a small town atmosphere. It's a very small town. People know each other, people care for each other. That's one of the things that we're known for. And you have something like this happen, it scared the community.
It was a real sense of helplessness. I didn't know what to do.
Almanita's father, Harold, is less indecisive. On the night of August 22, 2012, he makes plans to drive up from his home in Alabama to search for his daughter.
I just felt something bad. I was gonna leave. I started to leave that night, but I really wasn't prepared. So I was gonna leave the next morning.
Harold and his family spend a restless evening in Alabama. But on August 23rd, before they can leave town, a discovery 300 miles away changes everything.
At 6:45 a.m. on August 23rd, a woman named Kristen Brown was leaving her home in North Columbia to take her daughter to school when she saw a body lying in her neighbor's yard.
Kristen's ensuing 911 call leaves little speculation as to the identity of the female victim.
Oh my God, this is a young girl. Hey, we're getting everyone on the way, all right? She's a cute girl. Oh my God.
She thought maybe that was the missing person that we were looking for. This was the missing teen.
Everybody thought it was Gabby Swainson.
That's the first thing that came to my head. We found her, unfortunately.
Oh my God.
But just before first responders arrive at the scene, a man races from the front door of 613 Heron Glen Drive. It's Marcus Bailey.
Marcus, he comes outside, and his reaction immediately is he starts sobbing. He's emotional. She was face down in the front yard. He rolled her over and was able to recognize her.
The victim isn't Gabby Swainson as everyone fears, but Marcus's girlfriend, Almanita Smith.
She's laying face down. He goes out and throws a blanket over the body. He was having chest pains, having a reaction to seeing the corpse.
Stand on up, bud. Come with me.
He was having some kind of an attack. They took him to the hospital to get him evaluated.
With Almanita's grieving boyfriend now removed from the scene, investigators take their first look at their victim. And what they see isn't pretty.
It was very hot outside, and Almanita was in this state of decomposition.
The body was in a decomp state of excessive swelling, especially around the face. The tongue was swelled out of her mouth. Her limbs, you could tell, had an excessive amount of fluid in them, along with the abdomen area and the legs.
Everything starts to decompose at a different rate, but you can tell the process is in motion. Again, it's South Carolina in the summer. It was August. It's hot.
Any obvious sign of how she was killed?
But Almanita's state of decomposition presents investigators with a problem.
They couldn't get a definite cause of death. Probably could have been a strangulation. She wasn't stabbed, she wasn't shot.
And then there's the question of how Almanita's body ended up where it did. Could the mystery man she allegedly left her home with the day before have intentionally placed her here?
This is an odd case. This is a case that you don't normally see people that do this unless you're Jeffrey Dahmer or somebody that has a very twisted personality.
It suggests some kind of message. Why would someone take her away and cause her harm and then bring her back and lay her in the front yard without there being some kind of significance to that?
While Almanita's body is transported to the Richland County Medical Examiner's office for an autopsy, news of her death has reached friends and family.
Her death, great loss. It It did exactly like a tsunami, an earthquake. She touches so many people's lives. It devastating.
I was called at 9 o'clock that morning and drove straight to her house. I mean, it was a surreal experience for me.
While those close to Amanita begin to converge at her home, Detective Martin heads to the hospital to have a chat with Marcus Bailey.
At that point, he said that he wanted to speak with us.
I know this is a very difficult time for you, but are you comfortable answering some questions right now?
Yes, sir, I'll try.
He said Amanita was a really good person. She had just graduated from college, and she was in the process of being selected for an officer's position in the Army.
While Marcus seems genuinely upset by Amanita's death, investigators want to hear his story again.
We asked him the last time he saw her again. He said he saw her on the 22nd at about 11:30, and he said that she had left with this mysterious person.
I didn't really get a good look at his face.
So you're in a relationship with Amanita together, yet you're okay with her going off with a strange man?
It's kind of complicated.
He said that they had an open relationship. Sometimes they would be together, sometimes they'd be with other people. And she was allowed to kind of do whatever she wanted to do.
She still allowed me to live there, as long as I paid the rent.
But it's what Marcus says next that's the most alarming detail to investigators.
He said, well, she was picking up men on Craigslist. Men were buying her things.
The obvious fear is that maybe Amanita met somebody online, and that this person isn't just responsible for her death, but Gabby Swainson's disappearance as well.
It's not unusual for people online to exaggerate the truth about themselves a bit, let alone be totally opposite of who they really are.
But had this beautiful Army veteran really waded into the dangerous waters of online dating? That answer and more was about to swamp this investigation, leaving detectives to sort out the carnage of ill-chosen love.
This isn't what you do to people you love. This isn't how you treat people you love.
On August 23, 2012, a family's worst nightmare comes to fruition when missing 26-year-old Army reservist Amanita Smith is found dead in the front yard of her home.
She had a bright future. Anything she wanted to do, she could have done.
It sickens you because you think about the victim, and she had a very successful future. She had a very big future. She was doing so many things to make herself better, to prepare for her life.
It's a life that everyone agrees has ended far too soon, making detectives more determined than ever to catch Amanita's killer. But having just interviewed her boyfriend, Marcus Bailey, identifying this individual may not be easy.
Marcus said he and Amanita were in an open relationship and that she was meeting other people online. He said Amanita left the day before her death with a man he had never seen before.
Back at the crime scene, investigators begin questioning Amanita's friends and family for the first time. When investigators ask about Amanita's dating life, they find it difficult to believe that the straight-laced overachiever would have been so reckless.
She don't meet strangers. She don't meet people on dating sites, Facebook, Instagram, or any of those things. That's not who she was.
As for her relationship with Marcus, they say at first, Amanita had a hard time resisting the charms of her strapping soldier.
I think she met him, and he's one of those people where if that's your thing, he kind of looked right on paper.
But others say their first impression of Marcus left much to be desired.
I can honestly say when I met this character, I was not happy. And I told her that. I thought he was a loser.
The way he dressed, the way he drank all the time, the way he interacted with her. I mean, he was just a thug. That's the bottom line. He was a thug.
But Amanita apparently saw something in Marcus that she liked, and she wasn't one to back down from a challenge.
She has a very good heart, very big heart. Maybe she could help him change. That is the impression that I got, that she could help him change.
For the first few months, friends say it seemed like their lives were on solid ground. But then Amanita learned the truth about Marcus's military record.
She found out about some stuff that he was keeping from her about his past.
The military is really a small world. It's like 2 degrees of separation.
And the truth of the matter, friends say, is that Marcus had been living a lie all along.
Marcus Bailey had been dishonorably discharged for fraternization, meaning that he was having relationships with the enlisted personnel that he was supposed to train.
He was sleeping with privates. When you're a drill sergeant, you are not supposed to have any type of sexual contact at all.
A fact Marcus failed to share with Almanita.
Last text she sent me about him, she said, I found out that he was not who he say he was.
He had let her believe that he was being demoted, but he had already been kicked out in the whole nine because, you know, the military doesn't play that anymore.
I heard that he was actually getting up, putting on his uniform every day like he was going to work. And he was still representing himself as if he was an active duty soldier.
He got kicked out. He didn't have anywhere to go. He couldn't find a job. He wasn't working or anything.
But besides misrepresenting his own work and military record, it turns out Marcus had another secret. And this one, friends say, was a doozy.
Who's this Janelle that keeps texting you?
Nobody.
Nobody. I don't believe you. Who is she?
Marcus was in fact married to a woman that lived in Colombia.
Your wife?
Although he was estranged from his wife, he had a young son, and she was pregnant with their second child.
When were you going to tell me that?
It's over with.
It's over with.
Yes.
She started to see him and what was going on with him for who he was and had decided she didn't want that to be a part of her life.
Come on, baby.
Don't baby me. We're done. You can pack your stuff and you can go.
When she finally found out, she wanted him to move out.
Where am I go, huh?
But she felt bad because he didn't have a place to go. So she just let him stay there, move into the other room until he was able to get on his feet.
She was trying to help him.
As for the contention that Almanita and Marcus might have had an open relationship, her family doesn't buy it.
Never. Never. So either she was with you or she was without you.
To investigators, Marcus sounds like a cancer in Almanita's life. But that still didn't mean their topsy-turvy relationship had culminated in violence. Then, on August 24th, detectives receive Almanita's autopsy report.
4 to 7 days.
Her body had been dead for days. She had been in that state of decomposition. It just wasn't possible that she was alive and well and walking the day before at noon. The lack of the insects being on her suggests that she wasn't outside. It looks more like she was stored in a house.
But as another piece of this investigation falls into place, there's a far darker chapter of this story that's yet to be told. One so terrible, it's unforgettable.
It's like looking at the devil, like soulless, like there was nothing there.
An autopsy report has just found that 26-year-old military reservist Almanita Smith died at least 3 days before her body was discovered in the front yard of her Columbia, South Carolina home. A fact that seems to contradict Almanita's on-again, off-again boyfriend, Marcus Bailey's statement to police.
He said he saw her on the 22nd at about 11:30, and she was getting dressed up and leaving the house in this mysterious car. The position of the body and where fluid was inconsistent with what he was saying.
But phone records offer investigators another insight into Almanita's love life.
We tried to follow up with, well, who would this person be, this mysterious phone call? Well, there wasn't a phone call there that came in.
In fact, what Almanita's phone records do show is that her family and friends became concerned about her whereabouts as early as August 17th.
I'm trying to get in contact with you. I hope everything's okay. Yeah, but you need to call me back. 2 days. This is ridiculous. If you're going to go on a disciplinary act, you need to let everybody know.
Yeah, you need to call somebody and let somebody know something, baby. Anybody heard from you, everybody's calling around, you let somebody know if you're all right.
And we believe that she was last seen on the 16th, late hours of the 16th.
But just what transpired between the time Almanita had disappeared and the time her body was found on August 23rd? To unravel that mystery, detectives pull Almanita's bank and credit card records.
So we've got charges on her card during the time the autopsy report says that she's dead, including one in North Carolina. What do you think of the chances? We've got some videos.
Yep.
When police review the security cam footage, it's not Almanita they see on a 6-day shopping spree.
On video, we have images of Marcus using the credit cards.
There were clothing receipts where he had gone and made some purchases with her credit card. I believe there was a couple other receipts there. They were ATM receipts.
Then on August 19th, Marcus's 27th birthday, he really dropped some cash.
He went to a nightclub. When he started spending money at this nightclub, the bill was close to $500.
He had a birthday party for himself. Bought out sections in the club and bought out bottles and was just buying bottles for people.
The next night, he takes them to North Carolina. And again, he's using Almanita's credit cards. And they go into a nightclub and they spend another large sum of money, and then he takes everybody out to breakfast.
And this was during the period that her father couldn't get a hold of her.
In light of their growing suspicion, detectives decide to execute a search of Almanita's home. Almost immediately, they notice something very odd.
There was a lot of air fresheners. A lot of air fresheners in there.
You're almost smacked in the face with this air freshener. There was just so many different smells and coverings going on in this room. They were competition. It was not so much nauseating, but it was just overwhelming when you first walked in the door.
But underneath all that industrial aroma is a smell seasoned investigators are all too familiar with.
You smell that?
Yeah.
It was a decomp odor. It was the smell of death.
There's nothing like it. There's no mistaking it. You smell it once, you'll know again 20 years down the road. When you smell it, you'll know. You can't mask it.
When I opened up the dryer, there was a blanket, just like the one that had been placed over her body by Marcus Bailey. And the smell of decomp coming off of that was excessive.
I think we call them the cadaver dogs. I think you're right.
This is a dog that looks for decaying flesh and human flesh. It doesn't look for anything else other than that.
As the dog makes its way around the home, its well-trained nose soon locks in on two specific rooms, Almanita's master bedroom and a spare bedroom down the hall.
It alerts to this room, and it alerts to this bedding, and it alerts to the different parts of the house, saying that a body had been stored there.
If the dog could talk, it would have definitely said, this has been here for a while.
Investigators suspect the transporting of the body caused the pungent odor to waft through the house, which explains why officers didn't smell the stench during their initial cursory search. When investigators searched the garage, it appears that Marcus had been preparing to make a fast getaway.
His clothing was all in bags next to the car in the garage. Inside the car were her credit cards, her military ID, and other things.
While officers continue their search of the premises, they know one burning mystery is finally over.
The evidence was telling us specifically that it was not a whodunit. It was obvious that he was the one that had done this, the one that had killed her.
That afternoon, police arrest 27-year-old Marcus Bailey for the death of his former lover, Almanita Smith.
He was arrested at the hospital. I was mad. I was really mad.
I don't think this is domestic violence, and that's something that I've kind of been on the fence about since it's happened. This was just murder, flat out, cold-blooded murder.
While family and friends try to come to grips with the chilling truth, the full spectrum of Marcus's betrayal would soon be illuminated and would shine a light on pure evil.
The dude just had to be nuts. Couldn't be no other explanation besides that you crazy. But then you get out and you live in life while she dead and gone. The fact that he picked up a woman and brought her back to her home was the part that was sickening.
On July 23, 2013, 27-year-old Marcus Bailey's murder trial gets underway inside a Columbia, South Carolina courtroom. Marcus stands accused of killing his on-again, off-again girlfriend, Army reservist Almanita Smith, in August of 2012, a crime that sickens the entire community.
I never would have thought I would be burying my baby. To know that someone, this young man, Marcus Bailey, decided to play God, he took a lot from me.
She had a bright future. She had the world. Anything she wanted to do, she could have done. And he took that.
Prosecutors say Almanita's murder was one final betrayal in a rocky romance rife with lies and false promises.
Marcus wasn't in the military as he led Almanita to believe. In fact, he was dishonorably discharged and wasn't working. And he was still married to another woman with a baby on the way. In a nutshell, Marcus wasn't the man Almanita thought he was.
Here we have two different people. You've got Almanita, whose military career is growing. She's getting commissioned as an officer in the Army. She just finished college. She owned her own home. She owned her own car. She was being successful and had a mission and a dream. And you've got Marcus, he's got nothing.
I think he was jealous of her.
And while Amanita's head was probably telling her to let Marcus go, it was her heart, prosecutors say, that enabled Marcus to remain in her home.
He didn't have anywhere to go. He didn't have any money. He didn't have a job, couldn't get a job. She was just helping him to get back on his feet.
I believe Amanita had drawn a line in the sand. You're gonna mow the yard. You're living here for free. You're gonna do this.
Prosecutors believe Marcus balked at Amanita's demands sometime on the night of August 16th, 2012.
They had guests that evening who came over on the 16th.
So, when are you gonna mow the lawn?
I told you I'd get to that.
Get to it when?
And Marcus was saying that he wasn't going to mow the yard. It was his birthday. He didn't want to mow the grass the next day.
They were arguing during that time about him not doing his share around there and so forth. I believe that he probably murdered her that night. Probably after the friend left, they had an argument, and that's when it occurred.
I'm sick and tired of you always complaining all the damn time. You always
really?
damn complaining about every single thing.
We'll never know if it was just an argument that escalated or if he planned to kill her that night. And that we won't know because we weren't in the room, and I can't ask Amanita.
You do nothing.
Do not. Yo!
Get off of me! Get off.
I said, what? Shut up!
She's not breathing. You didn't call 911. You didn't try to help her. You didn't try to save her. You just let her rot like she was nothing.
He didn't have her nagging at him anymore. He was able to do what he wanted to, and he did. He went and partied all week, and he spent all her money.
I just think it was insane. It further cemented to me what his motive was. Like, you just wanted her money.
But prosecutors say the depths of Marcus's betrayal were truly sickening.
When he goes out and parties with the nightclub, he's picked up some random girl and had sex in Amanita's car. And then he goes and he picks up the clerk at the clothing store, and he takes her back and has sex with her in Amanita's home. We were able to validate that. She did have sex at that time, but she became suspicious a little bit about him because he wouldn't let her go upstairs.
Let's go upstairs.
And she was like, well, let's go upstairs to the bedroom. He wouldn't let her go upstairs.
We know that he had sexual relations with another female in the house when the body was upstairs.
In 21 years of law enforcement, that was absolutely the worst story and the worst thing that I'd ever heard. Being there, animal, sure, sheer animal.
This twisted trip finally came to an end on August 22nd.
The father had called him on the 22nd, had called 911, and then I think the rush kicked in that it was time to place the body out front.
A theory, prosecutors assert, that's bolstered by the trove of evidence that police recovered.
There was video footage of Marcus using Amanita's car and credit card. There were also positive hits by the police cadaver dog inside the home and on the blanket recovered inside the dryer. The evidence that Amanita died inside the house and was stored there for multiple days was overwhelming.
But despite what looks like an impossible case, Marcus's defense attorney does what he can under the circumstances.
It was the defense's idea that, yeah, I did do a lot of bad things. I may have cheated on this person. I may have used this woman's credit cards. I may have brought other women into the house, but that doesn't mean I killed her.
They wanted to attack the cadaver dog, and they wanted to attack the science, and they wanted to attack the neighbors and the witnesses and the friends, and they wanted to say all these people were just, randomly had gotten together to kind of do this to Marcus and cause Marcus all this grief.
Finally, on July 31st, 2013, the case goes to the jury. 3 hours later, they return with a verdict: guilty.
Marcus Bailey was sentenced to 50 years in prison.
50 years sounds like there's a hope that you might get out. It just feels like there's hope that you might live to get out, and I don't want him to live to get out. I want him to die in prison.
He's a sociopath, calculated, cold-blooded killer is what he is. I hope he rots in jail. I really do.
For Amanita's friends and family, the punishment can never fit the crime, nor fully explain the actions of a wolf hiding in sheep's clothing.
Was it worth it? Was it worth taking her life? Was the outcome worth you taking somebody so rare, so special, from this earth.
He didn't just take anybody. He took somebody that was special. She was an asset to everybody she touched, and that's who he took.
When you look at me, you don't see me. You see God's grace and mercy. That sustains me every day. There are times I feel like I just want to lose my mind, but I know I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna be okay.
But in the wake of this tragedy, while Amanita's family was still healing, the residents of Columbia, South Carolina were forced to weather another tough blow.
A boyfriend of Gabby Swainson's mother, the teenager that disappeared the same week that Amanita did, ultimately confessed to killing Gabby and was sentenced to 30 years in prison.
There was no connection between Gabby Swinson's case and Amanita's case, but the good news is both families got justice in the end.
The Academy crisis. The pressure on Jack intensified. Between Julian's threats and the grueling schedule of the Escoffier Academy, he was reaching his breaking point. During a high-stakes exam creating a classic beef bourguignon for a panelist, French judge Jack's hand slipped. The wine went in too fast. The heat was too high. The dish was a disaster. Mr. Tripper, the lead judge, Chef Maurice, sighed. Your talent is undeniable, but your mind is in Santa Monica, not in the kitchen. If you cannot focus, you will be asked to leave. Jack walked out of the academy that afternoon. His head hung low. He was a block away when the black sedan pulled up beside him. The window rolled down. Rough day, Jack? Julian Vane asked, a smug grin on his face. I hear Chef Morris is a very demanding man. It would be a shame if he found out about your living situation. The academy has a very strict code of conduct regarding moral character. Jack stopped. He looked at Julian, and for the first time, he wasn't afraid. He was angry. You really have nothing left, do you? Julian, you're a hollow suit with a fancy car. You think you can break us? We've survived Max. We've survived my death. We've survived Janet's mother. You're just a mosquito in a leisure suit. Jack turned and walked away, ignoring Julian's shouted threats. He had a plan. Chapter 23. Jack didn't go home. He went to the Regal Beagle and found Larry Dallas. Larry, I need a favor. A big one. It involves a tuxedo, a hidden camera, and your most convincing investor persona. Say no more, pal. I was born for this. The plan was simple. Larry would contact Julian Vane, pretending to be a disgruntled investor from a rival firm who wanted to leak information that would destroy Jack and Janet's reputation. They met Julian at a dimly lit bar downtown. Julian, desperate for leverage, fell for it. I don't care about the girls, Julian hissed, leaning into Larry's hidden microphone. I just want the lease. I'll frame Tripper for theft if I have to. I'll say he'd been embezzling from the academy's pantry. And the stalking? Larry asked, playing the part perfectly. A necessary evil. Julian laughed. The black sedan was a touch of class, don't you think? As Julian finished his confession, the lights in the bar came up. Jack, Janet, and a very confused Mr. Furley stepped out from the back booth. A touch of class, Julian? Jack asked, holding up a small tape recorder, more like a one-way ticket to a harassment suit. Julian turned pale. This is No, Julian, Janet said, her voice cold and steady. This is a rendezvous with reality. Leave us alone, or this tape goes to the police and to your remaining investors. Julian Vane scrambled out of the bar, and for the first time in weeks, the shadow over Santa Monica lifted. Chapter 24. The Forever Rendezvous. The celebration at apartment 201 that night was the loudest yet. Even Mr. Furley joined in, though he mostly just wanted to know if the maintenance man was actually going to fix the sink. I'll fix it, Mr. Furley, Jack laughed, pouring everyone a glass of champagne, right after I finish my head chef exam. As the party wound down, Jack and Janet found themselves on the balcony. The Ferris wheel was a blur of light against the midnight sky. Cindy was inside, happily showing Mr. Furley her depressed avocado plant, which had miraculously started to sprout a new leaf. "We did it," Janet whispered, leaning her head on Jack's shoulder. "We did," Jack agreed. "No more stalking. No more threat. Just us." "And the commute," Janet reminded him. "And the commute. And the burnt eggs. And the noisy neighbors." Jack turned her to face him, his eyes filled with a love that had been tested by fire and salt. "I love you," Janet would. "And I love you," Jack tripped. They kissed as the cool ocean breeze swept over them, a kiss that felt like a beginning rather than an ending. In the city of gold and salt, amidst the neon and the noise, they had built a fortress out of laughter and a home out of three. The wind through the palms sang its final chorus. It didn't whisper about secrets anymore. It whispered about the future. Because when you knock on the door of apartment 201, you don't just find a lovable space. You find a family. And in the rendezvous called life, that is the greatest masterpiece of all. Chapter 25. The Golden Ladle. The morning of the final exam at the Escoffier Academy arrived with a heavy, salt-laden fog that clung to the windows of apartment 201. Jack hadn't slept. He had spent the night mentally rehearsing the reduction of a deck. "You're going to be brilliant, Jack," Janet said, pressing a travel mug of strong coffee into his hand. "Just remember what you told me, cook from the heart, not just the recipe." Jack took a deep breath. "The heart is currently pounding like a drum, but I'll try." The exam was a grueling 4-hour ordeal. The kitchen was a symphony of clinking copper and the sharp scent of searing herbs. Jack's dish was a reimagined seafood symphony, a tribute to the Santa Monica coast that had become his home. When he presented it to Chef Morris, the room went silent. The chef took a single bite. He chewed slowly, his expression inscrutable. Then, he set his fork down. "Mr. Tripper," Morris began, his French accent thick. "Many students can follow instruction. Very few can tell a story. Dish, it tastes of the ocean, of jasmine, and of someone who knows where they belong." Jack passed with the highest honors. The Golden Ladle, the Academy's top prize, was his. That afternoon, a telegram arrived. It wasn't just a congratulatory note. It was a job offer. The Silver Anchor, a high-end restaurant perched on the cliffs of Malibu, wanted Jack as their new sous chef. Chapter 26. Starlight on the Sand. The news of the job offer sent apartment 201 into a frenzy of celebration. Larry insisted on taking everyone to the Regal Beagle, but Jack had other plans. He wanted a night that was just for him and Janet. A picnic. At night, Janet laughed as Jack led her down to a secluded stretch of beach. "Not just a picnic," Jack said, spreading a velvet blanket on the sand. "A masterpiece." He had prepared a 5-course meal, kept warm in insulated carriers. They ate under a canopy of stars, the sound of the Pacific providing a rhythmic backdrop to their conversation. Jack felt a ring box burning a hole in his pocket. He had planned the perfect speech, something about rendezvous and doors and knocking. But as he was about to drop to one knee, Larry Dallas emerged from the dunes, wearing a neon green leisure suit and carrying a portable radio. "Hey, lovers, I thought you could use some mood music," Larry shouted, turning the radio to a loud disco track. Jack groaned, burying his face in his hands. "Larry, this was a private moment." "Private, on a public beach. Don't be selfish, Jackie. Come on, let's hustle." The proposal was thwarted, but as Janet laughed and danced with Jack on the sand, he realized he didn't need a grand gesture. Every moment they shared was a promise. Chapter 27. The Ghost of the Anchor. Jack's first week at the Silver Anchor was a whirlwind of activity. The restaurant was beautiful, the staff was professional, and the owner, Sebastian Vaughn, was... Jack froze when he saw the name on the office door. "Vaughn, is he related to Julian?" "Sebastian is Julian's older brother," the head chef whispered. "But don't worry, they haven't spoken in years. Sebastian is the good one." But Sebastian wasn't just Julian's brother. When Jeanette came to the restaurant to surprise Jack for lunch, the color drained from her face. "Sebastian," she whispered. The tall, silver-haired man looked up from his ledger. "Janet Wood. My God, it's been a decade." Sebastian was Janet's high school sweetheart, the one who had gone off to Europe to study business and never looked back. The air in the room suddenly felt very cold. Jack stood in the doorway, his chef's whites feeling like a costume, watching the man who had been the first in Janet's life. Chapter 28. The presence of Sebastian Vaughn at the restaurant became a constant ache for Jack. Sebastian was everything. Jack wasn't wealthy, sophisticated, and he shared a history with Janet that Jack could never touch. "Here, just an old friend," Janet insisted one evening as they sat in the living room. "Here, helping me with some logistics for the shop. He knows the Malibu market." "Logistics? Is that what they call it when he takes you out for business dinners at the P.I.?" Jack's voice was sharper than he intended. "Here, my boss is boss. Jack, I'm trying to be professional." The tension boiled over when Sebastian offered to buy the building apartment. 201 was in, claiming he wanted to protect Janet and her roommates from future Julian. "I don't want your protection, Sebastian," Jack shouted when the man visited the apartment. "And I don't want your money. We take care of our own here." "And how are you doing that, Jack?" Sebastian asked calmly. "By making her work 12-hour shifts at a flower shop while you're playing with pans in Mal. She deserves more than this stucco box." Janet looked at Sebastian, then at Jack. "This stucco box is my home, Sebastian, and I didn't choose it for the architecture. I chose it for the heart inside." Chapter 29. The Great Fire. The climax came on a Friday night, the busiest night of the year at the Silver Anchor. A faulty gas line in the kitchen ignited, and within minutes, the back of the restaurant was a wall of flame. Jack didn't think. He grabbed a fire extinguisher and fought his way through the smoke to clear the staff. He found Sebastian trapped in his office, the door jammed by a fallen beam. "Jack, get out," Sebastian coughed, his face blackened by soot. Jack didn't leave. He used all his strength to heave the beam aside, dragging Sebastian out just as the roof began to groan. They emerged into the salt air, gasping for breath, as fire trucks wailed in the distance. Janet arrived at the scene, her face pale with terror. She ran past the police line, her eyes searching the crowd until they found Jack. She threw herself into his arms, sobbing. I thought I lost you," she cried. Sebastian stood a few feet away, watching them. He saw the way Janet held Jack, not with the nostalgia of a high school romance, but with the desperate, bone-deep love of a woman who had found her soulmate. "He's a better man than I gave him credit for, Janet," Sebastian said, his voice raspy. "I'm leaving for Europe again. The restaurant, I'll rebuild it, but I think it's time I left the logistics of your life to the professional." Chapter 30. A month later, apartment 201 was back to its chaotic, beautiful normal. The fire had been a wake-up call, a reminder that life was short and that every moment counted. Jack led Jeanette onto the balcony. The Ferris wheel was turning, a circle of gold against the indigo sky. This time, there was no Larry, no Sebastian, and no Max. Just the two of them. "Janet," Jack said, his voice steady, "we've been through a lot. Funerals, stalkers, mothers, and fires. And through it all, there's been one constant. This door." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring box. He didn't drop to one knee. He just stood close to her, his heart in his eyes. "I don't want to just knock on your door anymore. I want to be the one who opens it with you, every day. Forever." Janet would. "Will you marry me?" Janet didn't say a word. She just leaned in and kissed him. A kiss that tasted of salt and sea and a million tomorrows. "Yes, Jack," she whispered, 1,000 times. "Yes." Inside, Cindy and Larry were hiding behind the curtains, cheering and popping a bottle of cheap champagne. Even Mr. Furley was there, dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief. "Three's company. 2, Cindy shouted, running out to hug them. "But I think we're going to need a bigger sign." Jack looked at his friends, his family, and the woman who had changed his life. He looked at the stucco building and the neon lights of Santa Monica. He had found his place. He had found his rendezvous. The wind through the palms sang a final, joyous note. The door was open, the lights were on, and the stars were bright. Because in the end, it didn't matter who hers were or who his was. They were theirs, and that was all that mattered. Chapter 31. The morning after the yes. The morning sun over Santa Monica felt different. It was warmer, brighter, and carried the weight of a million new possibilities. Jack woke up on his couch still a gentleman until the final vows were exchanged, and found himself staring at the ceiling of apartment 201 with a goofy, permanent grin. "Jack, are you awake or just admiring the plaster?" It was Janet, leaning against the doorframe of her bedroom. She was wearing her old floral robe, but there was a new radiance in her eyes, reflected by the modus diamond flickering on her finger. "I'm awake," Jack said, sitting up, "and I'm officially the luckiest man in this area code, maybe the state." "Well, luckiest man, you better get your chef's hat on." Cindy is already in the kitchen trying to make engagement breakfast, and I think I smell something burning. Jack jumped up. Not the kitchen! That's my sanctuary. They spent the morning in a bubble of bliss, but it was quickly popped by a thunderous knock on the door. It was Larry, wearing a velvet suit that was 3 shades of purple too loud. Jackie, Janet, my favorite lovebirds. Larry burst in, holding a stack of bridal magazines and a list of potential bachelor party venues. I've taken the liberty of becoming the official wedding coordinator. First item on the agenda. The Regal Beagle reception. I'm thinking disco ball over the buffet table. Larry, Janet sighed, rubbing her temples. We just got engaged 12 hours ago. We haven't even called my mother yet. Your mother? Larry's face went pale. The tweed suit. Right. We're going to need a bigger disco ball. Chapter 32. The matriarch returns. The phone call to Martha Wood went about as expected. There was a long silence, a sharp intake of breath, and then a series of questions about Jack's credit score and his long-term investment plan. She's coming back, isn't she? Jack asked, watching Janet hang up the phone. She'll be here by Friday, Janet replied. And she's bringing Aunt Louise. Aunt Louise is like my mother, but with a magnifying glass and a lack of filter. The arrival of the Wood sisters turned apartment 201 into a battlefield of etiquette. Martha wanted a traditional church wedding back in their hometown. Jack wanted the beach. Aunt Louise wanted to know why Cindy wasn't married yet. Janet, darling, Martha said, surveying the living room. A beach wedding, in the sand. People will have gritty shoes. It's romantic, Mother, Janet countered. It's where Jack proposed. It's where we live. Jack took Martha's hand, looking her straight in the eye. Mrs. Wood, I know I'm not a banker or a lawyer. I'm a chef, but I promise you, when Janet walks down that aisle, whether it's made of carpet or sand, she'll be the happiest woman in the world, because I love her more than life itself. Martha looked at Jack, and for the first time, the hardness in her eyes softened. She didn't say anything, but she didn't mention the church again. Chapter 33. The Cindy Conundrum. While the apartment was a whirlwind of planning and family, Cindy was unusually quiet. She went to work early, came home late, and spent a lot of time staring at her avocado plant. Jack found her on the balcony one evening, watching the fog roll in. Hey Blondie, you've been awfully quiet lately. Are you worried Aunt Louise is going to ask about your dating life again? Cindy forced a small smile. No, I was just thinking, after you and Janet get married, what happens to Are you guys going to find a house? Am I going to have to find new roommates? The reality of the situation hit Jack like a cold wave. In his excitement, he hadn't fully considered the logistics of their three-way friendship. Cindy, listen to me, Jack said, his voice firm. We aren't leaving you. We're family. We'll figure something out. Maybe we find a bigger place. Or maybe we just stay here and turn the pantry into my office. But you aren't going anywhere. But it'll be different. Jack, Cindy whispered. It won't be three's company anymore. It'll be two's company, and a third wheel. Never, Jack promised, pulling her into a hug. You're the glue, Cindy. Without you, we're just two people who argue about the laundry. You're the one who makes this home. Chapter 34. The Bachelor Party. Larry style. Larry Dallas insisted that Jack needed a proper set. This resulted in a night that Jack would spend the next decade trying to forget. It began at the Regal Beagle with a round of tripper specials. A drink Larry invented that tasted like gasoline and maruchan cherries, and ended with them trying to rent a mechanical bull from a local country bar. Larry, I'm a chef, Jack yelled as he narrowly avoided being tossed into a pile of sawdust. I need my hands for the wedding cake. Relax, Jackie. It's about the adventure, Larry shouted, wearing a cowboy hat that was twice as big as his head. The night took a dramatic turn when they ran into Max the Mountain of a Man from the beginning of their story. Max had moved back to Santa Monica after things went south in San Francisco. Tripper, Max growled, blocking the exit. I heard you're getting hitched to the florist. Jack felt the old familiar panic rising, but then he looked at Max and saw that the man wasn't angry. He looked lonely. I am, Max, Jack said, standing his ground, and she's the best thing that ever happened to me. Max nodded slowly. Good. You're a lucky man. Treat her right, or I'll come back and finish what I started at the funeral home. Jack laughed, a genuine, relieved laugh. Deal, Max. Deal. Chapter 35. The vows under the Ferris wheel. The wedding day arrived with a perfect, cloudless sky. The beach was decorated with simple white flowers from Janet's shop, and a small wooden altar stood near the water's edge. Mr. Furley was the usher, wearing a tuxedo that was undeniably pink, but somehow worked. Larry was the best man, holding the rings and looking surprisingly nervous. Cindy was the maid of honor, looking radiant in a pale yellow dress that matched the morning sun. When Jeanette appeared at the top of the stairs, the world went silent for Jack. She was wearing a simple lace dress, her hair flowing down her back, just like the first day he saw her at the bar. But now, she wasn't just a beautiful girl in a peekaboo sweater. She was his life. They stood together on the sand, the sound of the Pacific providing a rhythmic accompaniment to their vows. I, Jack Tripper, take you, Janet Wood, to be my wife, Jack said, his voice trembling with emotion. I promise to always knock before entering your heart, to never let the fire go out in our kitchen, and to always remember that home is wherever you are. Janet smiled through her tears. I, Janet Wood, take you, Jack Tripper, to be my husband. I promise to always laugh at your jokes, even the bad ones, to keep our garden blooming, and to always cherish the unconventional life we've built together. As they kissed, the crowd erupted in cheers. The Pacific Park Ferris wheel began to turn, its neon lights flickering in the gathering dusk. Epilogue: The Key to A month later, life in apartment 201 had settled into a new, beautiful rhythm. They had decided to stay. Jack and Janet had moved into the larger bedroom, and Cindy had reclaimed the smaller one, but the living room remained the heart of their home. They sat together on the balcony, watching the sun set over the pier. So, Cindy said, sipping her tea, are we still three's company? Jack looked at Janet, then at Cindy. He pulled a new key from his pocket and set it on the table. It was a gold-plated key to the front door, with the number 201 engraved on it. We are, Jack said. But I think we need a new title. How about Three's Family? Janet leaned her head on Jack's shoulder. I like it. It has a nice ring to it. A knock came to the door. It was Larry, probably wanting to borrow $5 or suggest a double date with a pair of twins he'd met at the pier. Come and knock on our door, Jack sang, standing up with a laugh. We've been waiting for you. Janet and Cindy joined in, their voices harmonious and clear. As the wind whispered through the palm fronds, and the neon of Santa Monica began to glow, the door at the top of the stairs opened, and inside, the lights stayed on. Forever warm, forever home. The Architecture of a Lie. A novel by Gemini. Chapter 1. The Golden Facade. The Santa Monica sun hung low over the Pacific, casting long, amber shadows across the balcony of apartment 2. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of sea salt and the faint, lingering aroma of Jack Tripper's latest culinary experimenta that had defied the laws of gravity, just long enough to be admired before collapsing. Come and knock on our door, Jack hummed to himself, adjusting his apron. It was a mantra of sorts, a rhythm that defined their unconventional life. For Jack, Janet Wood, and Cindy Snow, the apartment was more than just a living space. It was a sanctuary of shared secrets and platonic intimacy. In a world of rigid expectations, they were a trio that defied the oats: two women and one man, living in a harmony that their landlord, their perpetually suspicious and flamboyant Mr. Rolf Furley, only accepted because he believed Jack's heart belonged to the brotherhood of men rather than the pursuit of women. The door burst open, and Janet and Cindy marched in, their faces flushed with a mixture of exhaustion and mild indignation. We've been waiting for you, Janet sighed, dropping her purse onto the wicker coffee table. Where are the kisses? Jack joked, sensing the tension. One for her, and for me. I'll take a double. Janet rolled her eyes, though a small smile tugged at her lips. Our friend Sue told us they were real gentlemen. Jack, some gentlemen? First, they shook our hands with polite smiles. And then they spent the rest of the night trying to shake the rest of us. Honestly, I think your friends need a lesson in boundaries. Jack chuckled, leaning against the kitchen counter. Well, we all can't be lucky, thank you very much. But tonight is different. Tonight, I've invited someone truly special over. Cindy, always the dreamer, leaned forward. Not another girl, Jack. No, Jack said, his voice dropping into a deeper, more sophisticated register. Not a girl, Cindy. A woman with class. Her name is Lisa Page. She's an interior decorator, and I told her I needed some professional advice. What's she going to decorate? Janet asked skeptically, gesturing to the mismatch of 70s decor and Jack's kitchen gadgets. Jack's eyes twinkled with a classic Tripper mischief. I don't know. I'd like to see how she looks on the sofa first. Get a feel for the... I've had enough of this, Janet said, standing up. I'm headed for bed. Between the bad date and the bad puns, I'm exhausted. Me too, Cindy added, yawning. I'm going to sleep so long that when I wake up, they're going to have to dust me. Jack's bravado faltered. Wait, girls, what about my date? What about the apartment? I sort of told Lisa that I lived alone. Janet stopped at the hallway door, her expression hardening into one of amused pity. That, dear boy, is your problem. Cindy and I will be in there, dead to the world, and that's the best you're going to get. Janet, help me out, Jack pleaded, but the click of the bedroom door was his only answer. Chapter 2. The Macho and the Turtle. The evening took a turn for the surreal when a knock at the door revealed Mr. Furley, dressed in a leisure suit that could only be described as an assault on the visuals of lime green and electric orange. Hi, Kids, Furley announced, his chest puffed out. Listen, I need one of you to feed my turtle while I'm gone. Janet would love to do it, Jack shouted, seizing any opportunity to be helpful. Where are you going, Mr. Furley? Cindy asked, peeking back out. On a wonderful romantic weekend made just for two, Furley said, his voice dripping with an unearned swagger. A leisurely drive to Loyola, dinner by candlelight, some intimate dancing, the works. Wow, Cindy breathed. Any woman would love that. Furley's face suddenly crumbled, the bravado evaporating. Do you know one who would like to go with me? The silence that followed was heavy. Janet and Cindy beat a hasty retreat to the kitchen, leaving Jack alone with the landlord's desperation. Jack, Furley said, leaning in, I know you look at me and say to yourself, that Furley never has any trouble getting women. I've got the moves, the threads, the savoir-faire. Crazy, Jack echoed, his voice flat. But believe it or not, even I can have a brief little dry spell. My last date was in February. February, that's not so long, Jack offered. 2 years ago, Furley whispered. So, Jack, fix me up. You must run into women at the hairdressers or wherever you go. Someone beautiful, intelligent, a woman who can appreciate a real macho. I don't know, Mr. Furley. Fine. Forget intelligent. As long as she can dress herself. Forget beautiful. They're shallow anyway. Jack, if she has body heat and speaks a few words of English, I want to meet her. Furley thrust a key into Jack's hand. Here's the key to my apartment. For the turtle, since I'll be gone all weekend. I'm leaving in 30 minutes. As Furley left, a light bulb, perhaps a slightly flickering one, went off in Jack's head. He looked at the key, then at his own cluttered living room. He had a date with a high-class interior decorator who thought he lived alone, and he now had the key to her empty apartment downstairs. Chapter 3. The Descent into Deception. When Lisa Page arrived, she was everything Jack had sharp-witted, and possessing an eye that seemed to catalog the floors of a room in seconds. Jack, she said, stepping into what she thought was his new home. Didn't you say you lived on the second floor? I do. Jack lied smoothly, ushering her in. It's just that the building is sinking, geologically speaking. Lisa laughed, a melodic sound that made Jack's heart skip. You are so funny. But Jack, this place, it's a decorator's nightmare, all this junk. I know, Jack said, gesturing wildly at Furley's velvet paintings. I rented it furnished. I'm still trying to talk the landlord, a tragic figure named Mr. Furley, into changing it. You should talk him into burning it, Lisa remarked, walking toward the hallway. Where's the bathroom? Or are we in it? As Lisa disappeared down the hall, the front door swung open. Jack froze. It was Mr. Furley. Mr. Furley, what are you doing home? Oh, I was cruising along, thinking how lucky I was going to get. When I ran into a tow truck, Furley grumbled. He towed me home. I got to talk on the radio, though. Charlie Baker, 10 to 4, out. Jack panicked. Lisa was in the bathroom. Furley was in the living room. The worlds were colliding. Mr. Furley, you ruined the surprise. Jack blurted out. You asked me to find a girl for you, and I found one. She's an interior decorator, and she couldn't wait to see your incredible decor. When Lisa emerged, Jack performed the most frantic introduction of his life. To his surprise, Lisa, thinking Furley was some eccentric client or friend of Jack's, began to play along. "I've never seen anything like this," she told Furley, staring at a plastic bust of Elvis. "It should be on exhibit. People would pay admission." Furley's chest doubled in size. "I decorated it myself." "I'm not surprised," Lisa said, her voice dripping with a sarcasm that went entirely over Furley's head. Chapter 4. The Pen Pal Protocol. The evening eventually migrated upstairs to the real apartment 201. Jack had managed to usher Lisa away from Furley, claiming they needed a change of perspective. But the peace was as they sat on the sofa, Jack trying desperately to steer the conversation toward romance and away from the weak floorboards he claimed were the reason they couldn't move too much. The bedroom door creaked open. Janet and Cindy crawled out on all fours, trying to sneak to the kitchen for a midnight snack without being seen. "Who are you?" Lisa demanded, jumping to her feet. Jack scrambled. "Who? Them! Oh, they're my pen pals! From up north. They had nowhere to stay, and I'm a charitable soul. I can't kick them out, or they'll never write me another letter." Janet looked at Jack, then at Lisa, then back at Jack. The silence was deafening. "You are an awful liar," Lisa shouted, grabbing her coat. "Jack Tripper, I'd never want to see you again." As the door slammed, Cindy looked at Jack with a mix of pity and admiration. "You're not an awful liar, Jack. You're just about the best darn liar I've ever met." Chapter 5. The Vow of Truth. The next morning, the apartment was quiet. Jack emerged from his room, not with his usual bounce, but with the somber gravity of a man who had seen the mountaintop and found it wanting. "Good morning, ladies," he said, pouring a cup of coffee. "I feel wonderful, because last night, I found the truth. I took a vow. From now on, I'm never going to lie again." Janet snorted. "Well, good for you, Jack. It was always there. You just never bothered to look." "I'm serious," Jack insisted. "And to start, Janet, remember when you asked me to close the flower shop for you and I said I didn't have time? I lied. I had the time. I just didn't want to be bothered." Janet's face fell. "I missed my date with Greg Dunn because of that." "And Cindy," Jack continued, relentless in his new holiness, "that cough medicine I sent you to 5 drugstores for in the rain, it didn't exist. I just wanted you out of the apartment so I could have Monique over." "My new shoes were ruined," Cindy cried. Jack beamed. "It feels so good to get that off my chest." He spent the rest of the day as a human wrecking ball of honesty. He ruined Larry's Playboy photographer scam at the Regal Beagle, effectively blowing his best friend's chances with a beautiful girl named Luann. He told Lisa Page her latest design looked like a penitentiary waiting room when he ran into her at the phone booth, earning him a swift slap to the face. The truth was setting Jack free, but it was making everyone else miserable. Chapter 6. The Compassionate Lie. The climax of Jack's honesty tour came when he found Mr. Furley waiting by the telephone, looking smaller than usual. "Lisa didn't call," Furley said quietly. I thought for a minute there, she really saw something in me." Jack opened his mouth to tell the truth that Lisa had mocked his apartment, that she thought he was a joke, and that she never wanted to see either of them again. The words were on the tip of his tongue. The vow was absolute. But then he looked at Furley's eyes. He saw a man who lived in a world of polyester and loneliness. A man who needed a win more than he needed the cold, hard facts. "Mr. Furley," Jack said, his voice softening, "I have to be honest with you about how Lisa felt." Janet and Cindy watched from the kitchen, holding their breath. "She didn't just like you, Mr. Furley," Jack lied, his voice thick with a new kind of conviction. "She loved you. She told me through tears that you were the most desirable man she'd ever met." Furley's eyes widened. "Really? Then why isn't she here?" "Her husband," Jack whispered. "A tragic illness. Total dependence. She'd leave him in a heartbeat for you. But she knows it would be the end of him. She's miserable. Mr. Furley, all she has left of you is the memory of that pizzazz you showed her." Furley stood up, a tear glimmering in his eye. He adjusted his orange vest. "That poor kid. If I'd known the whole story, I wouldn't have turned on the old charm so hard. It's a heavy burden, Jack, being this attractive." As Furley walked out, head held high, Janet and Cindy stepped into the living room. "That was the worst lie you've ever told," Jeanette said, smiling. "Yeah," Jack sighed, collapsing onto the sofa. and it was the best thing I've done all week. Chapter 7. The Salt of the Sea. In the days that followed, the compassionate lie hung over apartment 201 like a fine morning mist. Jack felt the weight of it every time he passed Mr. Furley in the hallway. The landlord had taken to wearing even more extravagant ascots, convinced he was a tragic hero in a forbidden romance. Jack, Furley would say, leaning against the doorframe of the kitchen. I saw a woman today at the market. Looked just like Lisa. For a second, I thought, but then I remembered. Her husband, the dialysis machine, the sacrifice. Jack would just nod solemnly, pushing a plate of burnt toast toward the landlord. She's a saint, Mr. Furley, a saint in sensible heels. But beneath the humor, something was shifting in the house. Janet had been quiet, her usual sharp wit replaced by a reflective distance. She spent more time at the flower shop, coming home late with soil under her fingernails and a faraway look in her eyes. Is it the Greg Dunn thing? Jack asked one evening, finding her alone on the balcony. The Santa Monica Pier glowed in the distance, a neon jewel against the black velvet of the ocean. No, Janet said, her voice small. It's just, your vow of truth made me realize how much we curate our lives. Jack, we live in this beautiful bubble, pretending we're just friends, pretending we're just roommates, pretending the world is exactly as it seems within these four walls. But isn't the bubble better? Jack asked, stepping closer. Out there, people slap you for your opinion on wallpaper. In here, we have each other. Janet turned to him, her eyes catching the moonlight. But what happens when the bubble pops? What happens when one of us finds a Lisa page that actually stays? The question hung between them, more intimate than any of Jack's flirtatious jokes. For a moment, the platonic masks slipped. Jack saw the woman behind the roommate, the strength, the vulnerability, the quiet longing. He reached out, his hand hovering near hers on the railing. I don't think I wanted to stay, Jack whispered. I like our architecture just fine. Chapter 8. The Ghost of Culinary Past. The fragile peace was shattered on a Tuesday afternoon, when a man named Sebastian Vane appeared at the door. Tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, and possessing an aura of cold efficiency. He didn't look like a friend. Jack Tripper, the man asked, his voice like ice water. Depends, Jack said, instinctively checking if the back door was clear. Do I owe you money, or I am the executor for the late Professor Beaumont's estate, your former instructor at the Culinary Institute. Jack's face softened. The old man. He passed. I didn't know. He left you something. But there is a contingency. Sebastian stepped into the room, his eyes scanning the apartment with the same judgmental intensity Lisa Page had shown. He knew about your living arrangement. He found it amusing. But he also knew the risk. The bequest is a prime location on the boardwalk for your own restaurant. Tripper's Table. Jack's heart hammered against his ribs. It was the dream, the only dream that mattered. The contingency, Jack asked. A morality clause. Beaumont was old-fashioned, despite his humor. He wanted to ensure his legacy wasn't tarnished by scandal. An inspector from the board will be staying in this building for 1 week. If they find any evidence of improper cohabitation, the deed goes to your rival, Larry Dallas. Jack choked. Larry doesn't know a whisk from a win. He's been working for the board, Sebastian said with a thin smile, and he's very motivated. Suddenly, the architecture of the lie wasn't just about Jack's dating life. It was about his entire future. He had 1 week to convince an anonymous inspector that he was exactly what Mr. Furley thought he was, single man living alone, or at the very least, a man whose heart was purely, safely elsewhere. Chapter 9. The Masquerade. The week turned into a frantic theater of the absurd. Janet and Cindy were forced to pose as the cousins from Fresno visiting on rotation. Every time a knock came at the door, the girls would scramble into the bedroom, hiding their shoes and jewelry. Larry Dallas, smelling blood in the water, became a constant presence. He haunted the Regal Beagle, dropping hints to anyone who would listen that Jack was a man of many mysteries. Come on, Jack Leary whispered, cornering him at the bar. Just admit it. You've got a harem up there. Give up the deed, and I'll let you be my head chef. I'll even let you wear a tall hat. Over my dead garlic bread. Larry, Jack hissed. The pressure began to fray the edges of the trio's bond. Cindy grew tired of hiding in the bathtub. Janet grew tired of the constant deception. And Jack was drowning in the stress of keeping Furley, Larry, and the mysterious inspector at bay. The climax came on the final night. A formal dinner was arranged of farewell to the cousin. Jack cooked like a man possessed. Beef Wellington, truffle risotto, a chocolate fondant that bled perfectly. But as the night wore on, the wine flowed, and the pretenses began to crumble. Mr. Furley, ever the interloper, crashed the dinner, wearing a tuxedo that smelled of mothballs and desperation. "I've come to toast the cousins," Furley announced, swaying slightly. "To the women who aren't Lisa Page. To the women who will never know the touch of a real man." In the corner of the room, a quiet man who had been sitting at the table someone Jack thought was a friend of Janet's stood up. He took off his glasses and looked at Jack with a piercing gaze. "I've seen enough," the man said. Jack's stomach dropped. "The inspector." "My name is Arthur Prynne," the man said, "and I've lived in the apartment next door for 6 days. I've seen the scurrying. I've heard the whispers. I've seen the way you look at Miss Wood when you think no one is watching." The room went silent. Even Furley stopped mid. "Scandalous?" Arthur Prynne asked, a small smile playing at his lips. "Improper, perhaps by the standards of the 1950s. But Professor Beaumont didn't leave you that restaurant because he wanted a saint. He left it to you because he wanted a man who knew how to balance ingredients. And love, Mr. Tripper, is the most volatile ingredient of all." He handed Jack a gold embossed envelope. "The deed is yours. Tell Larry Dallas to stick to photography." Chapter 10. The Architecture of Truth. The aftermath was quiet. The restaurant was a success, though Jack still spent his nights in apartment 201. The trio remained, though the air between them was clearer now, the secrets replaced by a mutual understanding. 1 year later, Jack stood in the kitchen of Tripper's table. The dinner rush was over, and the scent of rosemary and roasted lamb lingered in the air. Janet walked in, her arms full of fresh lilies for the tables. She looked at Jack, who was deglazing a pan, and smiled. "You're late," Jack said, not looking up. "I stopped by the apartment," Janet said, leaning against the pass-through. "Mr. Furley was in the hall. He told me to tell you that he's moved on. He's met a woman named Gladys. He says she has the fever." Jack laughed, a deep, genuine sound. Good for him. Everyone deserves a little bit of the fever. Janet walked over and stood beside him, her shoulder brushing his. "Jack, that night with the inspector, what Arthur Prynne said about the way you look at me, was that part of the masquerade?" Jack turned off the flame. He looked at Janet. Treely looked at her without the puns, without the slapstick, without the lies. "No, Janet," he said softly. "That was the only part that was real." He leaned in, and for the first time in their long, winding history, there was no knock on the door, no interruption from a landlord, and no need for a cover story. There was just the truth, finally finding its home in the architecture of their lives. Chapter 11. The morning after. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains of the living room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. For the first time in 3 years, the atmosphere in apartment 201 felt fundamentally different. The shared secret that had once been their shield was gone, replaced by a weightier, more complex reality. Jack stood at the stove, the rhythmic clack-clack of his whisk against the copper bowl the only sound in the house. He was making hollandaise, a delicate, temperamental sauce that mirrored his current state of mind. One wrong move, too much heat, or a moment of hesitation, and everything would curdle. The door to the girls' room opened, and Janet stepped out. She was wearing a simple cotton robe, her hair a messy halo of curls. She stopped at the edge of the kitchen, her gaze lingering on Jack's back. "Smells good," she said, her voice still raspy from sleep. Jack didn't turn around immediately. He needed the sauce to set. Eggs Benedict, a celebration of sorts. Celebration for what? For not having to pretend we're cousins from Fresno anymore, Jack said, finally turning to face her. He offered a tentative smile, the kind that held a question. Janet walked toward him, the space between them closing with a new kind of gravity. And what happened at the restaurant? Jack set the whisk down. The hollandaise was perfect, that too, although I'm still not sure if I'm allowed to kiss the delivery girl. I'm not the delivery girl, Jack. I'm the florist, and the landlord thinks you're, well, you know. Mr. Furley is currently occupied with Gladys the librarian, Jack reminded her, stepping closer. He's too busy discussing the Dewey Decimal System to worry about my brotherhood status. He reached out, his fingers brushing the lapel of her robe. The playfulness was still there, but beneath it was a tectonic shift. For 3 years, they had been the anchor for each other's storms, the laughter in each other's failures. To change that was to risk the very foundation of their sanctuary. Janet whispered, her eyes searching his. If we do this, if we really do this, there's no going back to just being roommates. If we break this, we break everything. Then we won't break it, Jack said firmly. We'll just renovate. He leaned in, the kiss tasting of salt and morning coffee. It was a promise made in the quiet of their kitchen, far from the prying eyes of the boardwalk, or the expectations of the world outside. Chapter 12. Cindy's Choice. While Jack and Janet were navigating their new landscape, Cindy Snow was finding herself standing on the edge of a different horizon. The scramble of the past week had left her feeling like a spectator in her own home. She watched the way Jack looked at Janet, and the way Janet's laughter had found a deeper, more resonant frequency. She was happy for them sincerely, deeply happy, but she also felt the first pangs of a quiet displacement. She sat on the edge of the fountain at the Santa Monica Mall, a bag of birdseed in her hand. A man sat down next to her, wearing a tracksuit and a whistle around his neck. "You're overthinking the pigeons," he said. Cindy looked up, startled. "I am." "Definitely. You're holding the seed like it's a burden. Toss it. Let them fly." Cindy smiled, a genuine, wide snow smile. "I guess I am a little weighed down. My roommates are, well, they're finally being honest with each other. And you're the odd one out." "Not out," Cindy corrected. "Just in a different chapter. I feel like I've been a pen pal for too long. I want to see if I can write my own letters." The man, whose name was Mike, and who turned out to be a physical education teacher, looked at her with a kind of straightforward admiration. "You look like someone who could write a bestseller. Cindy, why don't you start by taking that aerobics class I'm teaching at the community center? It's hard to overthink when you're doing jumping jacks." Over the next month, Cindy found a rhythm of her own. She became the star of Mike's class, her natural clumsiness transformed into a vibrant, infectious energy. She realized that while she loved the apartment and the three that they were, she also loved the one she was becoming. One evening, she sat Jack and Janet down on the couch, the same couch where so many lies had been told. "I'm moving out," she said, her voice steady. Jack gasped, nearly dropping his glass of wine. "Cindy, why? Was it the hollandaise? I can change the recipe." "No, Jack," Cindy laughed, hugging him. "Mike found a small place near the gym. It's tiny, and the walls are thin, but it's mine. I need to see what my own architecture looks like." Janet gripped her hand, tears shimmering in her eyes. "We're going to miss you so much. Who's going to go to the drugstore in the rain for Jack's fake cough medicine?" "Hopefully, no one," Cindy said, looking at Jack with a wink. "Because from now on, I think the Tripper household is strictly out of the business of fiction." Chapter 13. The departure of Cindy brought a bittersweet silence to apartment 2, but it was quickly filled by the roar of the Tripper's Table grand reopening. Jack's restaurant was the talk of the boardwalk, attracting celebrities, critics, and the occasional disgruntled landlord. However, success brought its own shadows. A new restaurant, Dallas's Den, opened right across the street. Larry Dallas, having failed to secure the Beaumont deed, had managed to convince a group of mysterious investors to back his own culinary venture. "It's psychological warfare, Jack," Larry shouted from across the street, standing under a neon sign that featured a very large, very poorly drawn steak. "I've got atmosphere. I've got mood. I've got a wine list that I found in a dumpster at the Hilton." "You've got a lawsuit waiting to happen, Larry," Jack yelled back, though he was secretly worried. Larry's place was packed with people who cared more about being seen than about the food. The tension came to a head when the city's most feared food critic, a woman known only as the Velvet Tongue, announced she would be visiting both establishments on the same night. "This is it, Janet," Jack said, pacing the kitchen of his restaurant. "If she hates the food, I'm back to making grilled cheese for Mr. Furley." "She won't hate the food, Jack. You have the secret ingredient. Truffle oil." "No," Janet said, walking behind him and resting her head on his shoulder. "Truth. Every dish you make is an honest expression of who you are. Larry is just selling a facade. People can taste the difference." The night of the review was a blur of high-stakes cooking. Across the street, Larry was setting off indoor fireworks and hiring mimes to serve appetizers. In Tripper's Table, the atmosphere was quiet, elegant, and focused. The Velvet Tongue entered, She was a formidable woman in a silk turban. She tasted Jack's signature scallops. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. She simply took a single note in a small leather book and left for Dallas's den. 2 hours later, a massive explosion rocked the boardwalk. Larry's indoor fireworks had interacted poorly with a leaky gas line in his atmosphere machine. No one was hurt, but the den was covered in glitter and fire extinguisher foam. The velvet tongue walked back across the street, her turban slightly askew. She sat down at Jack's bar. "Mr. Tripper," she said, her voice like sandpaper on silk. "I have spent my life eating lies disguised as lobster. Tonight, I ate at a circus across the street, but here I tasted a man who finally decided to stop running." She handed him her card. On the back, she had written, 5 stars. The architecture is solid. Chapter 14. The renovation of 200. As the months turned into a year, apartment 201 underwent its own renovation. The mismatched furniture was slowly replaced by pieces that Janet and Jack chose together not as roommates, but as partners. The third room was converted into a study, a place for Jack to write his cookbook and for Janet to design her floral arrangements. Mr. Furley and Gladys were now a permanent fixture at the Regal Beagle, often seen participating in ballroom dancing competitions. Furley still wore his extravagant suits, but they now seemed to fit a man who was actually happy, rather than a man trying to convince the world he was. One evening, Jack and Janet sat on their balcony, the same place where the vow of truth had started. The ocean was a deep, rhythmic blue, the sound of the waves, a constant, comforting heartbeat. "So," Janet said, leaning her head on Jack's shoulder, "what's the next project, architect?" Jack looked at the apartment behind them, then out at the horizon where the sun was beginning to dip again, casting that same golden glow they had seen 1,000 times before. "I was thinking about a permanent addition," Jack said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small, velvet box. Janet froze, her breath catching. "No lies, Janet, no masquerades, no pen pals or cousins from Fresno. Just me, asking you if you want to spend the rest of your life building something real with me." He opened the box, revealing a ring that was simple, elegant, and perfectly balanced. Janet didn't answer with words. She answered with the same truth that Arthur Prynne had seen in the restaurant, a truth that had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to be told. As the Santa Monica moon rose over the water, the architecture of a lie was finally complete, replaced by something much stronger, much warmer, and infinitely more beautiful. It was a house built on the truth, and for the first time in their lives, they were finally home. Chapter 15. The Uninvited Guest. Life as a married couple was a series of small, domestic victories and minor catastrophes. Jack's restaurant Tripper's Table had become a Santa Monica staple, and Janet's flower shop was thriving, providing the centerpieces for half the weddings in the valley. They had even managed to convince Mr. Furley that their marriage was the ultimate macho conquest, though he still occasionally dropped by to check if Jack was acting out of character. But the peace of apartment 201 was shattered on a Tuesday afternoon when the doorbell rang with a persistent, rhythmic aggression. Jack, currently perfecting a salmon mousse, wiped his hands on his apron and pulled the door open. Standing there was a woman in a Chanel suit, her sunglasses pushed up into a perfectly coiffed beehive. "Jack," she said, her voice like a cold martini. Jack's heart did a somersault. Lisa Payton." "The one and only," she said, stepping into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. She looked around, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the new, more cohesive decor. "I see you've made some changes. Still living in the basement." "It's not a basement, Lisa, and I'm married now." Lisa laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Married to one of the pen pals. How quaint." She sat on the sofa, crossing her legs with practiced grace. "I'm here because I'm opening a new design firm in LA, Jack, and I need a flagship project. I've heard your restaurant is the place to be. I want to redesign Tripper's Table." "Redesign it, Lisa? We just got the stars. People love the atmosphere. People love the food. Jack, the atmosphere is nostalgic. I want to make it revolutionary. Minimalist, glass and steel, no rosemary, just geometry." Janet walked in then, holding a bunch of sunflowers. She stopped, looking at Lisa with a mixture of recognition and immediate defensiveness. "Lisa," Janet said, her voice level, "what a surprise." The florist, Lisa remarked, not standing up. I assume you're the one who's been putting the weeds on the tables. The air in the room suddenly felt very thin. Jack stood between them, sensing that the architecture of his new life was about to be tested by a very old ghost. Chapter 16. The Morality. Clause 2.0. Lisa Page's proposal wasn't just a request. It was a threat. She had managed to buy a minority share of the building's debt, and she was hinting that a refresh of the restaurant would be in the landlord's best interest. She's trying to lie her way back in, Janet said that night, pacing the bedroom. She wants to tear down everything we built, because she couldn't have it herself. I know, Jack sighed, but if she pushes the board, they might start looking into the old deeds. The Beaumont bequest was very specific about character. The situation was further complicated when Larry Dallas decided to join forces with Lisa. It's the dream team. Jack, Larry shouted through the restaurant window. She brings the style. I bring the charm. Larry, you're a photographer for dental journals now, Jack yelled back. But the real challenge came when the board announced a second inspection. This time, it wasn't about Jack's living arrangements. It was about his business ethics. Lisa had filed a complaint, claiming Jack had secured the bequest through fraudulent emotional manipulation of the late Professor Beaumont. She's using the Furley lie against us, Jack realized. She's going to tell them that I pretended to be someone I wasn't just to get the restaurant. The night before the hearing, Jack and Janet sat on the balcony. For the first time, they considered the possibility of losing it all. We could just tell them the whole truth, Janet suggested. From the beginning, the roommates, the lies to Furley, the whole circus. They'll revoke the deed, Janet. The morality clause was about truth. I wasn't being truthful. You were protecting us, Jack. That's a different kind of truth. Chapter 17. The Final Foundation. The hearing was held in a mahogany-lined boardroom. Lisa Page sat on one side, looking victorious. Larry Dowell sat behind her, trying to look like a legal advisor. Jack and Janet sat on the other side, holding hands under the table. Mr. Tripper, the head of the board began. The allegation is that you deceived Professor Beaumont regarding your personal lifestyle and character in order to secure a business asset. Specifically, that you led people to believe you were, that you were not interested in women. Jack stood up. He looked at Lisa, who was smirking. Then he looked at Mr. Furley, who had been called as a witness, and was currently wearing a suit that looked like a disco ball had exploded. I did lie, Jack said, his voice clear. I lied for 3 years. I lied to my landlord, I lied to my neighbors, and occasionally, I lied to myself. A gasp went through the room. But I didn't lie to Professor Beaumont, Jack continued, pulling a small, yellowed letter from his pocket. This is a letter he wrote to me a month before he passed. He knew about Janet and Cindy. He knew about the Brotherhood facade. He said, Jack, a man who can convince a whole building of one thing, while keeping his heart true to another, is a man who knows how to manage a kitchen. Cooking is just the art of making people believe the butter isn't there. Jack handed the letter to the board. Lisa's smirk vanished. The lie wasn't about the restaurant, Jack said, turning to Lisa. The lie was about safety. But the restaurant? That's the most honest thing I've ever done. Every plate is a confession. Every meal is an invitation. The board deliberated for only 5 minutes. Lisa Page was dismissed. Her design firm deemed a conflict of interest. Larry Dallas was escorted out after he tried to sell the board members exclusive pictures of their own shoes. As they walked out into the Santa Monica sun, Jack and Janet were met by Mr. Furley. Jack Furley said, looking confused, that letter, it said you weren't. But I thought, Gladys and I. Mr. Furley, Jack said, putting a hand on his shoulder, I'm a man of many mysteries, but the biggest mystery is how I ever got lucky enough to live in your building. Furley beamed, adjusting his ascot. Well, that's true. It takes a certain kind of guy to handle the threads. Chapter 18. The Heritage of 201. 20 years later, the Santa Monica skyline had changed, but apartment 201 remained a pocket of preserved memories. The wooden balcony had been reinforced, and the wicker coffee table had long since been replaced by a heavy oak one, but the soul of the place was intact. Jack and Janet were no longer the frantic youngsters scrambling to hide roommates in the bathroom. They were the established couple of the silver-haired grandfather of fusion cuisine, and Janet, whose floral empire now spanned 3 cities. One autumn afternoon, a sharp, rhythmic knock echoed through the door. "Jack, can you get that?" Janet called from the study, where she was finalizing the arrangements for their 25th anniversary gala. Jack, currently graying but still possessing that same mischievous twinkle in his eyes, opened the door. Standing there was a young woman with a familiar mop of blonde hair and a suitcase that looked like it had seen better days. "Hi," the girl said, her voice a perfect echo of Cindy's youthful enthusiasm. "I'm looking for apartment 201, my mom said. Well, she said this was the place where everything started." "Sophie," Jack breathed, recognizing Cindy's daughter. "Uncle Jack," Sophie cried, dropping her bags and throwing her arms around him. "Mom said if I was going to move to the big city, I should start where the architecture was solid. She said you might have a room." Jack looked back at Janet, who had appeared in the hallway, her face lighting up with joy. He then looked at the extra bedroom, the one that had once been then a study, and was now essentially a guest suite. "Well," Jack said, a slow smile spreading across his face, "there is a catch. Sophie, we have a very strict set of rules in this house." "Rules?" Sophie asked, looking a bit nervous. "First," Janet said, stepping forward and hugging her, "no pen pals from up north. And second, if you ever run into a man in a lime green leisure suit though, they're mostly in museums, know you feed his turtle. No questions asked." Sophie laughed, the sound filling the apartment with a vibrant, new energy. As she began to unpack, Jack and Janet stood on the balcony, watching the Pacific. "Here we go again," Janet whispered, leaning her head on Jack's shoulder. "Not quite," Jack said. "This time, the truth is already moved in. We're just adding a new wing." Chapter 19. The Master Class. The anniversary gala for Tripper's Table was the event of the decade. The boardwalk was closed off, and a massive tent had been erected, filled with the scent of lilies and Slorostad duck. Sophie was serving as the lead hostess, her natural charm making her an instant favorite with the guests. But the night held one final test for the Tripper legacy. A young food critic, known for his acerbic wit and his penchant for deconstructing established icons, had been seated at the head table. His name was Victor Dallis-Sleary's son, though he had spent the last decade trying to distance himself from his father's flamboyant failures. "Mr. Tripper," Victor said as Jack approached the table, "I've read your book, The Art of the Confession. You claim that honesty is the foundation of flavor. But isn't it true that your entire career started with a masquerade?" The table went silent. Janet tightened her grip on her wine glass. Larry Dallas, sitting a few seats away, looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Jack didn't flinch. He sat down opposite Victor and poured himself a glass of water. "It started with the need for a roof over our heads, Victor," Jack said, "and it continued because we found something worth protecting. But you're right, there was a masquerade, and for a long time, I thought that was the weak point in the structure." He looked around the room, at Furley and Gladys, at Cindy and Mike, and at Janet. "But then I realized," Jack continued, "that the masquerade was just the scaffolding. You need scaffolding to build something high. You need it to hold the weight while the foundation sets. But eventually, the scaffolding comes down. What's left is the building. And Victor, if you want to judge the building, don't look at the wood we used to hold it up 25 years ago. Taste the food." Jack signaled to the kitchen. A plate of simple, perfectly seared scallops was placed before Victor. "No fireworks," Jack said. "No atmosphere, machines, just the truth." Victor took a bite. He closed his eyes. The room held its breath. It's balanced," Victor whispered, his sharp edges finally softening. "It's honest." He looked at his father, Larry, who was beaming with pride. For the first time, the Dallas legacy and the Tripper legacy found a common ground, not in a lie, but in the simple, undeniable reality of a well-cooked meal. Chapter 20. The Vow Revisited. The final guests had departed, leaving the boardwalk to the quiet company of the moon and the tide. Jack and Janet walked back to apartment 2, their hands entwined, their steps synchronized by decades of shared rhythm. They didn't turn on the lights. They didn't need to. They knew every inch of their home by heart. They sat on the sofa, the same spot where Jad had once tried to see how Lisa Page looked on the sofa, and watched the waves. 25 years, Janet said, her voice filled with a quiet wonder. "And we're still standing," Jack added. "No weak floorboards, no sinking building." Janet turned to him, her face illuminated by the silver moonlight. Do you ever miss it? The scramble, the frantic hiding, the pen pals. Jack thought for a moment. He thought of the laughter that had been fueled by fear and the intimacy that had been forged in the fire of shared deception. I miss the energy of it, he admitted, but I wouldn't trade the peace we have now for all in the world. Being honest with the world was the hardest thing I ever did, Janet. But being honest with you, that was the easiest. He leaned in, and the kiss was no longer a promise of a renovation. It was the celebration of a finished masterpiece. As the Santa Monica sun began to rise on a new decade, the architecture of a lie was finally, irrevocably gone. In its place stood a heritage of truth, a home built on the only foundation that never crocks, a love that learned to knock on the door, stay for the kisses, and eventually build a world that was exactly, perfectly, honestly its own. Chapter 21. The Beaumont Journal. The morning after the anniversary gala was draped in a soft, coastal fog. Sophie was already up, helping Jack inventory the restaurant cellar. As they moved through the cool, dimly lit room, Jack's foot caught on a loose floorboard near the rear rack, spot he'd walked over 1,000 times but had never noticed before. Watch it, Uncle Jack. Sophie cut. That's strange, Jack muttered. He knelt, prying the board loose. Beneath it lay a small, leather-bound book wrapped in oilcloth. It was Professor Beaumont's personal journal, one that had been missing since the day he passed. As Jack flipped through the pages, his eyes widened. It wasn't just recipes. It was a chronicle of every chef Beaumont had ever mentored and a detailed account of the trial of the trio. He knew everything. Sophie, Jack whispered, his voice trembling. He even knew about the night the building sank. He wrote about how he stood outside in the shadows, watching us scramble with the pen pals. He wasn't testing my cooking. He was testing our loyalty to each other. But as Jack reached the final pages, the tone of the journal shifted. Beaumont had written about a secret partner, a silent investor, who had helped fund the boardwalk's development. A person who had stayed in the shadows for 40 years, and now, according to a recent entry from the 80s, wanted their due. Who is it? Sophie asked, leaning in. The name was blurred by water damage, but the initials were clear. Chapter 22. Shadows of Santa Monica. The mystery of EP didn't stay a mystery for long. Within the week, a fleet of black SUVs appeared on the boardwalk. A group of men in sharp tech mogul attire began measuring the distances between the shops. Leading them was a woman whose presence felt like a cold front moving in from the north. My name is Eleanor Prynne, she announced, stepping into Tripper's table. She was Arthur Prynne's daughter, but where her father had been a man of quiet observation, Eleanor was a woman of aggressive expansion. My father was the silent hand that kept this boardwalk from being sold to developers decades ago. But times have changed. The architecture of this district is obsolete. We're building the glass horizon, a multi-story luxury mall. Your restaurant is in the path of the future. You can't buy the boardwalk, Eleanor, Janet said, her voice rising in the empty restaurant. It's a protected heritage site. It was, Eleanor corrected, laying a set of legal documents on the bar. But my father's original contracts had a sunset clause, one that expires on the anniversary of his death, which is next Tuesday. The threat was real. Eleanor Prynne wasn't just looking for a buyout. She was looking to erase the past. She viewed the Tripper legacy as a relic of a dishonest age. Your father believed in us, Jack said. He saw the truth behind the scaffolding. My father was a romantic, Eleanor sneered. I'm a realist, and the reality is, your lease is now in my hands. I'm offering you a graceful exit. If you refuse, I'll deconstruct this place until there isn't a single brick left of your truth. Chapter 23. The Secret Ingredient. The battle for the boardwalk became a Santa Monica legend. Jack, Janet, and Sophie refused to back down. They rallied the old neighborhood Larry Dalla, Cindy, even the grandchildren of the Regulus, who had once frequented the Regal Beagle. But legal battles are won with documents, not memories. Jack pored over the Beaumont Journal every night, looking for the secret ingredient that could stop the demolition. Sophie, look at this, Jack said at 3 a.m. on the eve of the deadline. He pointed to a faint sketch in the back of the book, a blueprint of the original building foundations. Beaumont and Prynne didn't just build shops, they built a sanctuary. Look at the shared wall between apartment 201 and the restaurant. Sophie looked closer. It's not just a wall, Uncle Jack. It's an arch. A structural arch that spans the entire block. If you remove the restaurant, the entire residential building above it, the one that's actually a designated landmark, will collapse. And Arthur Prynne knew that. Janet realized. Joining them, he made sure that the legacy of the people was literally woven into the stones of the building. To tear down the restaurant is to destroy a landmarked residence. Eleanor Prynne had overlooked the physical architecture in her pursuit of the financial one. Chapter 24. The Architecture of Destiny. The final confrontation took place on the boardwalk, under the eyes of the city council and a crowd of hundreds. Eleanor stood with her demolition crew, ready to give the order. "Stop!" Jack shouted, stepping forward with the journal and the blueprints. He explained the structural integrity of the arch. He showed how the architecture of a lie had actually been the architecture of a community, one where every shop supported the residents, and every residence gave life to the shop. The city architect confirmed Jack's findings. The demolition order was rescinded on the spot. Eleanor Prynne's Empire had met a force it couldn't compute, the weight of 40 years of shared history. As the crowd cheered, Jack looked at Sophie. "You saved it, Sophie. You saw the arch." "I learned from the best," she said, looking at Jack and Janet. Larry Dallas stepped forward, snapping a photo this time, a genuine one that would make the front page of the Los Angeles Times. Larry leaned in and whispered, "I guess you really can't shake the trippers, Jack?" "Not as long as we have the right foundation, Larry," Jack replied, winked. Chapter 25. The Final Knock. The sun set over Santa Monica, painting the sky in a palette of deep violets and burning oranges. The boardwalk was alive with celebration. Music flowed from the Regal Beagle, and the scent of rosemary and roasted lamb once again filled the air at Tripper's table. Jack and Janet walked up the stairs to apartment 201. They were tired, but it was the good kind of tired, the kind that comes from a day well lived and a battle won. They sat on their balcony, the Pacific breeze cooling the night. "One more thing," Jack said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small, tarnished key. "I found this in the back of the journal. It's a key to a safe deposit box Beaumont left at the bank. I opened it this morning." "What was in it?" Janet asked. Jack pulled out a small, framed photo. It was of the three of them, Jack, Janet, and Cindy, from their very first year in the apartment. They were laughing, caught in the middle of a frantic scramble to hide a date from Mr. Rope. On the back, Beaumont had written, "The most beautiful buildings are those that can weather the storm without losing their smile." To Jack, Janet, and Cindy, the architects of the only truth that matters, each other. A soft knock came at the door. Jack and Janet looked at each other. They didn't rush. They didn't scramble. They didn't hide. Jack opened the door. Sophie was standing there, holding a bottle of champagne and 3 glasses. "Come on in, Sophie," Jack said, stepping back with a smile. "We've been waiting for you." As the sounds of the night gathered outside, the three of them sat together, the past and the future merging into a single, beautiful present. The architecture was finally complete. The lie was gone. The love remained. And in the quiet of the night, if you listened closely, you could almost hear the echo of a song from a simpler time, a song about knocking on doors, waiting for and finding that Three's Company, after all, was just another word for home. Chapter 26. The Whispers of a New Era. The victory over Eleanor Prynne brought a temporary peace to the boardwalk, but the modern world was a relentless tide. Sophie Tripper, now firmly established as the head chef of Tripper's Table, felt the shift more than anyone. The boardwalk was no longer just a place of nostalgia. It was becoming a hub for influencers, food bloggers, and a new kind of experienced economy that prioritized the visual over the visceral. One evening, after the last diner had departed, Sophie sat at the bar, nursing a glass of chilled white wine. The restaurant was quiet, save for the rhythmic humming of the industrial refrigerators. A shadow fell over the doorway. It wasn't the aggressive silhouette of Eleanor Prynne, but a softer, more hesitant figure. "Is it too late for a confession?" the voice asked. Sophie looked up. It was Victor Dallas. He looked exhausted, his sharp suit rumpled, a stark contrast to his usual polished demeanor. "The kitchen's closed, Victor," Sophie said, but she gestured to the stool next to her. "But the bar is always open for a friend, or a rival, whichever one you are tonight." Victor sat down, leaning his head in his hands. "My father is sick, Sophie, really sick. And the medical bills, they're consuming everything. the photography studio, the arc. I even had to sell the copyright to his most famous masquerade photos to a tabloid. Sophie felt a pang of genuine sympathy for all the rivalry between their families. The connection was deep. Larry Dallas had been the flamboyant shadow to Jack's earnest light. I have a plan, Victor whispered, his eyes meeting hers. But it involves another lie. A big one. The kind that would make our parents proud. Or horrified. Chapter 27. The Silent Critic. Victor's plan was audacious. He had discovered a series of unreleased recordings from the old Desadio tapes Jack and Larry had made during their late-night sessions at the Regal Beach. In these tapes, they joked about the great Santa Monica heist, a fictional plot they'd concocted to steal the boardwalk's original deed back from a corrupt city councilman who never actually existed. If we release these as a podcast, Victor explained, a true crime drama that blurs the lines between reality and fiction. We can raise the money for Dad's treatment, but we need a centerpiece. We need a physical object that proves the heist was real. And let me guess, Sophie said, her eyes narrowing. That object is an apartment too. The Beaumont Journal, Victor said. There's a map in there. I saw it when Uncle Jack was showing the council the blueprints. It leads to a hidden vault under the boardwalk. Sophie hesitated. Jack and Janet were away on a cruise, their first real vacation in years. The apartment was hers to guard. To use the journal for a fabricated heist story felt like a betrayal of the truth they had fought so hard to establish. But as she looked at Victor, the boy who had been her childhood playmate, the man who was now desperate to save his father, she saw the old tripper spirit flickering. We're not going to lie, Victoria, Sophie said firmly. We're going to tell a tall tale. There's a difference. We'll call it The Legend of the Three. It'll be a tribute, not a scam. They spent the next month recording. They combined the old tapes with modern interviews. They turned the history of the boardwalk into a mythic journey. And for the hidden vault, they decided to use the old, forgotten basement of the Regal Beagle, the one that had been sealed off since the 70s. Chapter 28. A Recipe for Disaster. The podcast, The Legend of the Three, became an overnight sensation. It tapped into the world's hunger for a story that felt both magical and grounded. Fans began to flock to the boardwalk, searching for clues, trying to find the hidden vault. But with fame came a new kind of scrutiny. A rival podcaster, a cold-eyed woman named Sarah Graves, began an investigative series to debunk the legend. She claimed that Sophie and Victor were nothing more than grifters using the memories of their parents to line their pockets. They talk about truth, Sarah Graves said in her latest episode. But their entire legacy is built on a man who pretended to be gay to get cheaper rent. Let's not forget the original sin of apartment. The community began to turn. The same people who had cheered for Jack and Janet now looked at Sophie with suspicion. The architecture of the lie was being deconstructed again. But this time, the weapons were social media and viral outrage. We have to open the vaults, Victor said, pacing the kitchen of Tripper's table. If there's nothing in there, we're finished. The restaurant, the shop, everything Dad built will be tarnished. There is no vault, Victor, Sophie shouted. We made it up for the story. Are you sure? Victor asked, pulling a page from the Beaumont Journal that Sophie hadn't seen. It was a letter from Arthur Prynne to Beaumont, dated 1979. The archive is secure. Beaumont, below the Beagle, where the floorboards meet the tide. Only a Tripper or a Dallas will know the combination. Chapter 29. The night they entered the basement of the Regal Beagle was thick with the smell of damp earth and ancient whiskey. They carried flashlights, their beams cutting through the heavy, stagnant air. Sarah Graves was there too, followed by a live-streaming camera crew. She wanted to catch the hoax in real time. Go ahead, Sophie, Sarah challenged. Show the world your empty room. Sophie and Victor reached the far corner of the basement. The floor was made of old redwood planks, sea-worn and gray. Sophie knelt, feeling for a notch, a sign, anything. Suddenly, her fingers found a brass ring hidden beneath a layer of grime. She pulled. The floor didn't just open. It slid away, revealing a small, stone-lined chamber. Inside, there were no gold bars or stolen deeds. There were thousands of photographs. Larry Dallas had spent his entire life documenting the real Santa Monica. Not the glamorous celebrities, but the waitresses, the janitors, the poets, and the families who lived in the shadows of the palm. And next to the photos were hundreds of letters from Jack Tripper to the people he had helped, the meals he had cooked for free, the small, quiet acts of kindness that he had never mentioned to anyone. It's not a vault of treasure, Sophie said, her voice echoing in the chamber. It's a vault of witnesses. This is the truth, Sarah. My father and Larry didn't just share a lie. They shared a responsibility. They were the keepers of the neighborhood's heart. Even Sarah Graves was silent. The live stream reflected a reality that couldn't be debunked. A life built on a foundation of genuine human connection. Chapter 30. The Eternal Architecture. The heist story was forgotten, replaced by the archive of the boardwalk. The medical bills were paid through a foundation set up to preserve the photos. Larry Dalek recovered enough to see his work displayed in a gallery at the Santa Monica Museum of Art. Jack and Janet returned from their cruise to find their daughter a hero and their legacy more secure than ever. One evening, the whole group gathered on the balcony of apartment 201. The wicker table had returned for the night, and Jack was serving his famous nap. You know, Jack said, looking out at the boardwalk where a new generation was laughing and dancing. I used to worry that the lie was the only thing people would remember, that we were just a punchline. Jack, Janet said, taking his hand. A lie is just a temporary roof. It kept us dry while we built the walls, but the walls are made of what we did for each other, and those walls are never coming down. Sophie stood next to Victor, watching the sunset. What's next, architect? She asked her father. Jack smiled, that same mischievous twinkle as bright as the day he first walked into the apartment. I was thinking about the kitchen, Jack said. You could use a little redecorating. I know a guy who's very good with threads. Mr. Furley, now a centenarian but still wearing a shocking shade of lavender, raised his glass. Just as long as you don't touch the bathroom light, Jack. I'm still not sure who left it on in 1978. The laughter that followed was the sound of a building that was finally, perfectly, eternally, complete. The architecture was solid, the foundation was love. And in apartment 201, the door was always open. The kisses were always real. And company, well, company was the only thing that made the house a home. Epilogue. The legacy continues. Sophie Tripper became the first chef to win a Michelin star for a restaurant that still served comfort food. She'd never forgot the lesson of the vault, that the most important ingredients aren't found in a pantry, but in the stories we tell and the secrets we keep for the right reasons. Janet's flower shop became a training ground for young botanists, teaching them that a garden, like a life, needs both the sun of truth and the shade of a little mystery to thrive. And every year, on the anniversary of the sinking building, a small group would gather at the Regal Beagle. They would toast to the roommates, the landlords, and the pen pals. Because in Santa Monica, where the sea meets the sand and the lies meet the light, there is one truth that remains. Come and knock on our door. We've been waiting for you. The End Cowboy of Apartment 201. A novel of romance, deception, and shag carpeting. Prologue. The golden hour of Santa Monica. The Pacific Ocean was a bruised purple, reflecting a sun that refused to go down without a fight. In Santa Monica, the air smelled of salt, coconut-scented tanning oil, and the distant, greasy promise of burgers from the pier. It was 1979, an era defined by disco beats and the precarious balancing act of three young people sharing a two-bedroom apartment. Apartment 201 was more than just a living space. It was a sanctuary of pastel colors and wicker furniture. But tonight, the air inside was thick with more than just the humidity of a California evening. It was thick with Jack Tripper's frustration. Chapter 1. The Tongue-Tied Chef. Jack Tripper sat at the kitchen table, a dog-eared Spanish textbook spread before him like a battle map. He was a man of many talents. He could julienne a carrot in seconds, and bake that didn't collapse under the weight of a heavy synod. Linguistics was his Achilles heel. "Malamo Jack," he muttered, his voice a low rasp. "Dinner will be served at 8. La cena será a las 8. He was dreaming of a cruise ship. A friend had landed a gig cooking in the Caribbean, simply because he could navigate a menu in Spanish. For Jack, stuck in the grind of culinary school and part-time shifts, the idea of the open sea in a kitchen that smelled of lime